The Auburn Tigers are in it for some really crucial defensive players.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. It's a Recruiting Thursday. We're joined by Brian Smith. We're going to talk all things recruiting. Of course, the Locked On Recruiting Insider, as well as the recruiting expert over at auburndaily.com. Our recruiting coverage is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. We will talk with Allen Plexico about his new book, and we'll answer the question of what's the most important game in Auburn history. But let's jump into recruiting first. Brian, let's start with Jared Smith, the edge rusher from Thompson. We've talked about him a ton before. He's huge, 6'6", 235, still has room to grow. This guy keeps popping out to you, and we bring him up often when you and I talk off air.
Yeah, he's a really, really unique kid. For one, the first time I spoke to him, it was a very odd start to a friendship because I said, "Do you really have size 18 shoes?" I was looking at the biggest feet I've ever seen other than Shaq. The kid a junior in high school, but really easygoing kid. But he was up at the Under Armour Atlanta camp and did very well against top-notch offensive linemen. Georgia wants him, Bama wants him, LSU, Florida, you name it. And, of course, Auburn as well. He's getting ready to come back to Auburn for an unofficial visit. And this is something that you and I have really focused on in the last couple months, especially since Kalen's taken over in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah,
if you're going to beat Alabama, especially for defensive players, which they are famous for, this is the year you need to do it. Number one, Auburn needs defensive players in this class that focus on D-line. But DeBoer is what? He's an offensive guy. If you can't beat Alabama when Saban steps down, etc., that does not set the bar very high for the future. So you need to win this. And it's an elite year for defensive linemen. And he happens to be at the program that everybody in the state of Alabama comes into the state recruits first, and that's Thompson. Yeah. I mean, everything like you could make an argument he's the most important recruit for a litmus test for Auburn in the entire 25 class. D lineman, Alabama's backyard, position of need, a whole 9 yards. Mm-hmm. You're getting ready to have him on campus again. I want to see coming out of this within, let's say, 2 weeks, give or take. Yeah. Does he or does he not set an official to the Auburn Tigers? Yeah. He told me a few weeks back that Georgia was the one official that he knew. He didn't mention Bama. So I'm guessing he just has out of all the staffs probably the best long-lasting relationship with UGA because their defensive staff pretty well set, and Kirby's still the main guy there. Yeah. Bama and Auburn's a little different. So they're newer coaches there because of the coaching changes in the last 2 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned Auburn's kind of window to pounce and acquire some defensive talent. Right. Well, let's talk about the biggest recruiting news from the Auburn side of things that happened. I guess it was over the weekend, and it's negative, but Antonio Coleman, top defensive lineman in the state, or one of, was at Alabama, flipped from Alabama to Auburn. Yay. Now he's flipped back to Alabama. I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, it's like I tell people, recruiting is always fluid, but even for recruiting, making 3 commitments by early March is a lot. I mean, he's from Mobile. That's an area, again, if we're going to talk about importance, historically, Alabama does better in Birmingham. Auburn does better in Mobile. It's, just northern, southern, blah, blah, blah. But they're both elite players we're talking about, and Jared and now, in this case, Big Tony. Yeah. You can't lose D lineman to your number one rival. That's no bueno. Mm-hmm. Are they going to be able to replace him? I don't know. But at the same time, you have to still recruit him. He's at the same high school that KJ Lacey's at and several other kids coming along the road. They've got 2 or 3 underclassmen that Auburn and Alabama are going to covet, etc. It would behoove the Auburn staff to keep recruiting him, and I'm sure they will. Yeah. I highly doubt this recruitment, whether it's Auburn related or not, is over. So it's just proof, though, Zach, look, recruiting in 2024 and on,
it's different.
It's really hard, man. I mean, I know that kid, and I had no idea that was coming. Like, it's really hard.
Yeah, and I wonder how much this has to do with the change on the defensive line. you never know if like, okay, if NIL becomes a factor and it's like, okay, well, I'll flip and just go to that. I mean, there's so many different variables now, especially with the court ruling of the NCAA where you can use NIL to recruit now, which was that happening before? I'm not going to accuse anybody, but I'm sure it was brought up in some form or fashion. But now when you look at Auburn hiring or promoting Vontrell King-Williams to be the new defensive line coach, and the best asset of your 2025 recruiting class is defensive linemen, like we knew that there was a chance that this would happen.
This is what I always bring up. Relationships. Well, you lost one of the guys that had a relationship. Obviously, they still have people in the building that he's familiar with, but when the main guy that's going to coach you leaves, there's nothing that Hugh Freeze or his staff can do about it. Because when a guy gets an opportunity, he's going to take it.
Right.
You know, he's doing best for him and his family. I get it.
Especially when it's the NFL. It's not like he went to another college, but it's like the NFL in today's current state of college football. It's like, yeah, you'd rather coach D-line in the NFL than you would at college. For sure.
No NIL and no recruiting. Are you kidding me? That this is not a news flash. We hear about this all over. College coaches do not like the landscape right now.
They've got to add contracts to it. They have to. They've got to figure out a way to have guys contracted out, but we'll see. All right. So Jared Smith, you think right now it seems like it's a Georgia lean? Do you think Auburn could possibly be number 2 there? What do you think?
That's the thing. Like Auburn has a chance, but I don't know if there is one. Like Georgia was the only school he said definitely going to take an OB to UGA. He did not know another one. But Auburn, I know from just talking to him face to face, was all up in his business, really making an effort. This was right before the decision on some of the guys going and coming in. All these, everybody changes their mind, and kids try to pull other kids. This is only a few weeks ago, and he may have a different opinion. He may have 3 visits in his mind now. That's how fast these things change. But Auburn's put in the effort. When he comes to campus, it's either this weekend, next week, whatever it is. I want to know, does Jared end up feeling comfortable enough to say, okay, in addition to UGA, Auburn is going to get a visit? That's a yes, no for me, because I'm sure he's been to Auburn's campus in his lifetime half dozen times or more. I mean, it's not like it's very hard to get to Birmingham to Auburn.
Right.
So if they can't get him on campus, that's a concern for me. And I'm not saying I expect that, but this needs to be a slam dunk. You have to at least get an OB out of Jared Smith.
Yeah, so that's Jared Smith, the edge defender from Thompson up in Birmingham. Let's talk about the other in-state edge defender, Zion Grady, of course, from Enterprise. You're really high on this guy as most folks. What are your feelings about Zion right now?
I don't think that he knows what he's going to do, because for those that don't know, he originally committed to Bama, and then the whole Saban thing blew up. And again, it's when a coach leaves, that's, I get it, especially for a defensive guy, kind of matters if Saban is at that school. He's obviously a defensive-minded coach. Mm-hmm. Auburn has as good a chance as anybody, and I've spoken to his coach about it. I've been to his high school. Yeah. This is a young man that Auburn has as good a chance at now as anybody. Like Kirby Smart flew in on a helicopter to go see this kid. He's a dude. Kirby doesn't just fly around for fun.
Right.
So Auburn should be right there. And again, need to see the visit list kind of matriculate. Auburn should be on the short list. I think Eric Winters too, who ironically is his teammate. He's leaned, at least everybody thinks, to Auburn. That's got to help, doesn't it? I mean, if you're the guy you're going to be playing next, because they're both probably going to be linebackers / edge guys. Mm-hmm. This is another one. If Auburn doesn't at least get an OB, there's something wrong. They've done a good job to date. Now they got to finish, because this kid is really twitchy, really long, and just a great fit for Auburn overall.
All right, 2 more defensive players that you are very interested in, and we'll discuss who those guys are and how Auburn stands in their recruitment in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits. Doesn't matter what it is, they've got you covered. With over 122 million parts, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Today's show also brought to you by our friends at Alumni Hall. Alumni Hall is the best place to buy all of your Auburn swag, all of your Auburn merch, whether it's for you, your loved one, your kids, your pet. If you just need some stuff to decorate a tailgate or your walls or your desk, they have you covered. They've got 3 great physical locations in Auburn, Opelika, and Huntsville. And they also have you covered on their website, alumnihall.com. Baseball season's here. Look, it's March. It's time. If you don't have Auburn basketball stuff ready to rock and roll for the big dance, make sure you head over to Alumni Hall, whether it's in person or online, to make sure you're ready for one of the best events in sports. Alumni Hall, thank you so much for sponsoring today's show. Brian Smith, Locked On Recruiting Insider, hanging out with us. The next guy I want to talk to you about, Andrew Maddox, 6'3", 270, defensive lineman from Oak Grove. That is in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Seems like Auburn and Ole Miss are the main 2 here. Are you hearing otherwise?
He's going to visit LSU and some other schools unofficially, but like he just got a crystal ball or whatever it is, one of the predictions for one of the networks to Auburn. Here's the weird part. Like Lane Kiffin tries to keep the kids in state as he should. His brother just signed with Ole Miss. Mm-hmm. So like this, again, this shows you how fluid recruiting is. You would think the Rebs would be a lock, right? Apparently not. So it's just...
I wouldn't want to play defense at Ole Miss.
I'm not saying that I disagree with that, but like they've signed a lot of talented defensive players in the last 10 years, and they still get about 40.
No question. Yeah.
I don't know, but it just shows you that sometimes it's not just about your brethren, your family members. You're going to kind of do what you want. Auburn's been after him for quite a while, and this is one of the best defensive linemen in the country since they lost Coleman. If you're going to lose somebody, you got to replace him with a dude, maybe even better. It's debatable, but he's an elite player. Again, LSU, Auburn, Ole Miss. He can go pretty much wherever he wants. A&M, everybody's recruited him. Right. And he can play strong side end or D tackle. He's that athletic. I'll take those guys all day. Since he got crystal balled, again, I forget which network it was, I'm curious if they get him on campus, if he could be on commit watch in the next month or so. I know he's visiting this month, and I also know that Auburn is really trying to get a big-time D-line class, so they might put on the full court press here.
Yeah, it looks like Cole Pinkston with on 3 put in
there we go
to Auburn. So yeah, we'll see what happens there. And then another defender, and admittedly, I hadn't heard a whole lot about this guy, so you're about to teach me a lot. Elijah Melendez from he's a Florida kid. Looks like he's committed to Miami. Okay, so talk to me about Elijah Melendez.
He's from Osceola High School in Kissimmee, just south of Orlando. When this kid walks in the room, you can see why he's recruited. He's got offers from all but one SEC school.
Okay.
Elite player. Miami's where he's committed, but he's getting ready to visit LSU, Auburn, and some other schools. I don't really consider him a commitment to Miami, and I also don't think he realized how hard he was going to be recruited. He moved into Florida from Colorado. Nobody knew he existed. And then, of course, in the state of Florida, and at the high school,
what a big difference.
Kids. Yeah, what a big difference.
From Colorado to Florida. Goodness gracious.
And now, there just aren't many guys that can run like this kid.
Okay.
Because he was a running back originally. And
is he interested in Auburn?
What's that?
Is he interested in Auburn?
He's visiting.
Yeah.
He's coming to the campus. So he's taking a trip in a couple of weeks. And I know him. He's a fit. Culturally, he would fit at Auburn all day long. Easygoing guy, very laid back. And Auburn needs defensive players, man. This is an important class defensively and on the O-line. I think this is a kid they could end up stealing because Miami's going for a lot of linebackers in this class. They could end up he could kind of go elsewhere, if you will.
Got it.
Why not Auburn? So they don't have anybody committed at the spot, and they don't have anybody like him. He's a freakazoid. This is a guy that can play early.
So is he your true Mike linebacker, or is he a guy that they send in blitz situations, or what kind of linebacker do you think he projects to?
I would play him inside, but he's athletic enough that especially on 3rd and 6, you can line him up outside and he'll make a guy miss and get to the QB. Elijah is a thumper though.
Got it.
When he was 16 years old, he looked like he was 25.
Yeah. I mean, I'm looking at some of his pictures now. He is physically impressive for sure. Yeah. All right. You this past weekend you saw Denarius Gray the wide receiver that is committed to Auburn in the 2026 class. And that kid has moves, considering that he's still got what, 2 full years of high school football left. He's impressive, man. What stands out to you about Denarius Gray, the 2026 Auburn commit?
It's ironic. He's at Chaminade Madonna, and that's the program that Jeremiah Smith came out of, the #1 recruit in the country last year at South Ohio State.
Yeah.
They have one kid that's elite weave, and they just seem to plug him in at Chaminade. 6'2", 6'3", 170 pounds. He's really long-legged. He's not filled out yet, but he's changed his body already, and he's going to end up at like 200, 210 pounds. But in the one-on-ones, he just dominated. He was arguably the best underclassman there, which is saying like South Florida is just completely loaded at receiver every year. Yeah. He might be the best of all the 26 South Florida receivers. He's committed to the Tigers. This is a kid that can go wherever he wants. I asked him why. He's got a relationship with Auburn's receiver coach. They actually have both lived on the same street in South Florida. That is about as fortuitous for the Tigers as it can get. So he's got a great relationship, and that's why he told me flat out. It's about the guys that are in the office. They made him feel at home, and he's coming back up.
Yep.
So it's one thing to say you're committed. It's another to show it by making the long trek from the Fort Lauderdale area on up.
That's a long way. So, all right, we've got a great conversation with Allen Plexico coming up in just a moment about his new book and a debate on, I don't know, just some Auburn history that I thought was pretty good. You want to stick around for that conversation. Brian, in the meantime, how can people check out everything you've got going on?
auburndaily.com is first and foremost. We've got a lot of recruiting stuff going on, and here in the next 2-3 weeks, especially, anything you can imagine about recruiting is going to be coming through the site because of all the unofficial visits and spring practice. And then at on X at FBScout_Florida, going to be fun, my friend. Going to be a lot of fun.
All right, what is the most important game in Auburn history? We discuss in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. All right, and today's show is brought to you by Amazon Fire. Fire TV is your destination for sports, from live games to highlights to in-depth analysis. Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that can plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Whether it's opening weekend for baseball or that college basketball tournament, you're going to want to have a Fire TV. So be sure to check this out. Fire TV, they recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supply of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes us here at Locked On. And of course, the most, the biggest pro leagues and college conferences as well. So Fire TV channels, they help you dive into all of the action. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. And joining us now here on Locked On Auburn, special guest, a returning guest, Allen Plexico, the host of the AU Wishbone podcast, as well as the author of several books. But the book we're talking about today, The First Time Ever. And we were talking before we clicked record. This is one of the more important games in the history of Auburn football. That's safe to say, right?
Arguably the most important. That's generational, and we can, argue about it. But I think for some of us, it is the most important. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously we're talking about the 1989 Iron Bowl, the first time Auburn came here, and we beat them. It was excellent. But it sounds like this book is packed full of stories that aren't really well known. Kind of jump into that for a second, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, that's exactly. John and I wanted to do a book about that game because we were both there. We were like juniors that year, and it was just the perfect time, to be an Auburn student as far as we were concerned. The tail end of the Pat Dye era. Arguably, this is the last great Pat Dye game. There's a couple in 90, Florida State, whatever, and it was also the last game Auburn played in the decade of the 1980s, because the next game we play is January 1st bowl game in 1990 in a Hall of Fame bowl against Ohio State. So it's the last game of the 80s, which is so fitting because we spent that entire decade trying to get the game to Auburn.
Right.
So I would describe this book as like it's in 3 parts. The first part is the early history. We go back to 1893, how the Iron Bowl first happened, how it first came together. And from the very beginning, Alabama was trying to screw us over and do us wrong. It is unbelievable the things that we found that they were doing from the very beginning to try to get the upper hand in this series. So we go through all of that. The second part is really, how did we get them to come to Auburn, and why did they think they didn't have to, right? I mean, that's a big part of it from our perspective today is, why would any team think they could tell us where we had to play our home game? That's just mind-blowing. And yet Alabama thought they had a God-given right to tell us where we could play our home game. It's absolutely astonishing. And we go through and lay out why they thought that and how they kept trying to make it the way it was, Yeah. And then the last third of the book is pretty much the game itself, like building up to it. We go quarter by quarter, play by play, breaking down every play, the players, everything that happened in the game that led to the win, and then kind of the aftermath, Toomer's Corner, the rolling, and kind of what it's meant to the program afterward. And we have a 30-page appendix at the end where we solicited stories from other people that were there. Yeah. And they gave us like a paragraph or a couple of sentences each on what it meant to them and what it meant to Auburn. So I feel like we covered every possible base, to mix metaphors. We covered every possible base with this book, right?
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like it's just a bunch of information about, like we said, one of the biggest games in Auburn football history. I've got a question about something that you just said, but first I want to make sure everybody knows how they can get the book. So you guys will have two events this weekend. One is going to be in Homewood, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That's Friday. Yeah. Give all the details. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, Friday at 5 p.m. in Homewood. It's a Little Professor in Homewood. There's two Little Professors, so we make sure people understand. It's the one in Homewood, 5 o'clock, and they promise they're going to have like snacks and beer and stuff, and John and I are going to like have a discussion, and they may have like a special guest to lead the discussion, or I don't know how they're going to do it, but they've kind of teased it with us, so I'm looking forward to that. So we'll be talking about it, answering questions, signing books, and they'll have hardcover and paperback copies of First Time Ever, and they'll also have paperback and hardcover copies of last year's big book that we had, I think we've talked to you about, which is Auburn Basketball from Barkley to Bruce.
I read that one. It was great. Yeah.
Oh, glad. Yeah, it's the history of like every season, starting with Sonny Smith arrives all the way up until last year. So they'll have that one too. And special announcement, we're going to have a very limited number of copies of a special version of it where we change the title.
Virginia Double Dribbled. I love it.
Yeah, there have been people who have been asking us to do that, and I'm like, all right, do we want? And like 100 people emailed us and texted us and said, please do that. So we'll have a few of these. It's kind of first come, first serve if you want a Virginia Double Dribbled copy. There were people saying, I've already got the book, but I'll buy another one to get that cover. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah, that would look good on a bookshelf for sure. I don't think there's any question about it. And then you guys will be in Auburn on Saturday.
Yeah, on Saturday from 1 to 4:30, I think, right before the Georgia game. So John and I are going to go to the Georgia game. If we run into people there, that'd be awesome. But we're going to be at Auburn Oil Booksellers, I guess on Toomer's Corner, right near Toomer's Corner, all afternoon. Same thing. I don't know, what festivities they have going on, but we may be, depending on the weather, we'll be outside at a table or something, or inside, hoping people come by and pick up the book. And I'm stashing a few of the special copies of this one away too, just for Auburn. We won't give them all out at Birmingham. We'll save a few for the Auburn folks.
Yeah. I'm going to try to get my family out there to the event Saturday from 1 to 4:30 at Auburn Oil Booksellers. And I've been in there multiple times. That's a great spot down there. So
yeah, they were really nice. Yeah.
So you talked about how crazy it was that Alabama didn't think that they needed to ever come here to play the Iron Bowl. And I wasn't alive in 1989. I mean, so I'm just trying to grasp that concept of how crazy it is. I just have a hard time understanding the context, and maybe reading this will help. I don't know, but I just have a hard time really understanding how that was even a thing and how we as Auburn even let it get to that point.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you a little bit about it. We go into super depth on it and interview people and everything, so you'll get the whole story in the book. But I'll tell you a couple of things. But a lot of it really comes down to it comes down to not playing for 40 years, right? There was that everybody knows that we didn't play Alabama for 40 years from 1908 to 1948, something like that, right?
Mm-hmm, sure.
And so when we resumed the series, it was hard to get them back together. You know, there was the state legislature got involved. Everybody knows this part of the story. But what people I don't think know, some of the stuff we uncovered was that in order to get them back together, they basically made an agreement because they were afraid. See, here's the thing. The popular story is the state legislature threatened to cut off funding for both schools if they didn't play. That's not really true. That's not really true. Instead, this is crazy. Instead, the state legislature said, if you will start playing each other in a stadium that's nice enough now, and neither Bryant Denny nor Jordan Hare at that time were really considered big enough for this series. So they said, if you will agree to play somewhere else, a third-party place, we, the state legislature, will give you money to build up your stadiums and eventually move it home and home. And both Auburn and Alabama said, money? Yeah, we'll take money. So the agreement was we'll play in Birmingham until the state gives us enough money to build up our home stadiums. But they got trapped in this loop of playing in Birmingham. It became the normal. And so after years and years of playing in Birmingham, they just kind of both said, this is how it is. And Alabama kept, especially with Bear Bryant, kept foisting new contracts that would go years into the future, right? So that when Auburn finally said, you know, maybe we should move it to Auburn, Alabama's like, dude, you signed a long contract. You've signed your soul away, right? And we're like, oh, okay. And then finally, it really took Pat Dye and Bobby Louder and a few other people, but they're the ones at the front, right? To kind of dig in their heels and say, look. And in fact, there's a great quote where as soon as Pat Dye was hired, he went to visit Bear Bryant because, of course, they were best buddies, right?
Yeah, they were tight, right?
They were so tight. And they respected the crap out of each other. And so Pat Dye sits down with Bear, and the first thing out of Bear's mouth is, well, I guess you're going to want to move that game to Auburn. And Pat Dye's response was, we're going to move that game to Auburn. Ain't no what. We're going to. And that just set the tone, right? Pat Dye's like, we're going to do it. You might as well get ready. And after that, it becomes Alabama trying to find every trick in the book to prevent it, to slow it down, to keep it from happening. And they even put together like a joint committee of Auburn people and Alabama people to meet. And the Alabama committee was led by Red Blunt, the millionaire construction guy. And they said at the very first meeting, Red Blunt sat down and said, let's just make this clear up front. Alabama is never coming to Auburn to play a football game. And the Auburn people are like, see you at the next meeting, got up and left. And that was that. Wow. And I mean, it got to where lawyers were hired, judges, it was going to be this huge thing, and they had to find a way to get around it. And eventually they're able to get cooler heads to prevail. And again, in the book, we kind of go into the specifics of how they were able to work it out. But it involved a lot of late night phone calls and horse trading.
So if this wasn't the year, if it wouldn't have been 1989, hypothetically, how long do you think it would have lasted? If Coach Dye would have just not put up as much of a fight or whatever, is there another point where you would look and say, okay, this is probably when it would have happened, would have been when the contract ended? Or do you think there's a chance if nobody stood up to it, the Iron Bowl would still be being played in Birmingham?
Now, the only way it would still be played in Birmingham is if both schools still wanted it to be.
Yeah.
And
sure.
What's interesting is Pat Dye said from the beginning, as soon as we get our game to Auburn, Alabama's going to want to have theirs in Tuscaloosa. And Alabama, I think, in part contracts and in part just to be Bama, right? Just to be recalcitrant. They dragged it out in Birmingham as long as they could. But by the time, Saban got there and everything, they're like, no, we're going to Tuscaloosa. Because they saw how good it was in Auburn. Plus, there was a lot of money involved. There was a lot of it came down to season ticket sales. That you could sell a season ticket in Bryant Denny bigger than you can sell a season ticket that includes Legion Field. And Pat Dye understood the money and he understood the pride of it and all. Yeah. But as far as the year, that's a really good question. I think that probably the year that Alabama wouldn't have just pitched a fit was 93. I think 93 was the first year the contract was no longer involved. And so what happened was we thought the contract ended after 88. And we were saying, so Pat Dye says, okay, the contracts last year is 88. We're going to play in Auburn in 89. And we kind of made that our line in the sand, 89. And what happened was Alabama at the 11th hour found this document that we didn't have a copy of at Auburn that was allegedly signed by like Jeff Beard, the AD or whatever back then. And it said extended. We agree on both sides to extend it through like 91, 92 or whatever. And Auburn's like, we don't have that document. We're not going to do that. And Alabama's like, we'll see you in court. So then it became a matter of, well, what year are we actually going to settle on? So Alabama wanted like 93. We wanted 89. And that's how we ended up doing the 91 game in Birmingham after we'd played in Auburn. That was called the bone we threw to Bama to get 89. Yeah.
Interesting.
Which was a weird game. I was at the 91 game in Legion Field. That was as a surreal of an experience as you will ever see. Legion Field with a big AU in the middle of it. It was so weird on that artificial turf. Oh, it was so weird, Zach. It was bizarre.
I bet, dude. I bet. Man. All right, so I'm hooked. So give us the rundown one more time. How can people get the book? How can people check out the events that you guys are doing this weekend?
Right. So Friday, 5 o'clock. Little Professor in Homewood, beer and snacks and good time talk and discussion. And both books will be there, the basketball book and this book. And then Saturday, 1 to 4:30, Auburn Oil Booksellers in Auburn. Similar situation right before the Georgia game, basketball game.
And if folks want to order it online, is that available yet?
It should be by the time of the book launch. If it's not already, it'll be on Amazon, hardback and paperback. It'll be on Barnes and Noble's bn.com site. I don't think we have a Kindle of it yet. The Kindle version of our Auburn books don't do near as well as books because I think people want to have it. You know, they want a souvenir kind of. So yeah, we'll have it in paperback and hardcover depending. We actually did a Kickstarter for this book back in November for people that wanted to jump in and get it for Christmas. And I mean, we moved several hundred copies then. So if you've already got one, you probably already got it signed, but come out and see us anyway. We'll sign it again.
It's such a great topic. I mean, it's so emotionally charged. It's so historically charged. And I mean, I've heard my dad tell the story a million times. Right. Yeah. And it's going to be cool to kind of hear it from a different perspective or read it from a different perspective. So this is awesome.
Yeah. Oh, you'll love it. You'll love it. I mean, there's even stuff like Alabama at one point, their trustees passed a rule saying Alabama would only play in Tuscaloosa. And that's one of the reasons the series actually got interrupted briefly was that Auburn said, all right, we were just at Tuscaloosa last year. We're not coming back again. Alabama's like, well, then I guess we won't be playing you. Who but Alabama would have the hubris to say we will only play home games? And they did. Isn't it crazy? I mean, it's just stuff like that page after page. You're reading this book going, what? Yeah, it's insane.
Where does 89 rank among Iron Bowls for you?
I mean, it and the kick six. And I mean, really, if you go back the 82 game, I was too young for the 70. I was alive for the 72 punt Bama punt, but it's in here. I do like, John and I did like 5 pages on it, but because it leads up to, but I think those are like the crown jewels, or 89 and 13 and 72 and maybe 82 because it ended that 9-year streak. Pat Dye beat Bear Bryant for the first time. Bo Jackson is a freshman. I mean, there was so much in that game too, but for me, this one really is the biggest one because this is the one where we quit being the little brother and said we are on equal terms with this monster across the state, right? That treated us like crap for 100 years.
And hiring a coach that's going to stand up to the evil empire kind of feels like what's happening right now. So
yes, that's it.
Yeah. So maybe history's repeating itself. We'll see. Van Allen Plexico, thank you so much for your time, brother. Talk to you soon. And I'm going to try to get out there Saturday.
That'd be awesome. And John and I appreciate you so much, Zach. We appreciate everything you do and what you do for Auburn. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you so much, brother. Talk to you soon. Thank you so much to Van Allen Plexico. Thank you so much to Brian Smith for hanging out with us on today's show. We'll see you tomorrow. This has been Locked On Auburn.